The meeting hall on Meridian Point was filled with tension. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat around the massive circular table, their voices rising in anger and fear. At the center of the debate was the Kralin Empire and their latest conquest of 3 peaceful systems in the Outer Rim. Ambassador Marcus Reed sat quietly in his chair, watching the chaos unfold around him. The other species were doing what they always did when faced with a crisis. They were panicking. The tall, blue-skinned Atheni were clicking their mandibles in distress while consulting their data tablets. The stocky Valdros merchants were already calculating their losses from disrupted trade routes. The warrior-like Hevik were beating their fists on the table and demanding immediate military action. "The Kralin Empire has gone too far this time," declared General Voss, the Hevik representative. His scarred face showed the fury of a lifetime warrior. "They have enslaved entire populations and stripped those worlds bare. We must strike back with everything we have." Scholar Prime Eli of the Atheni stood up slowly, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture of peace. "Violence will only breed more violence. We should consider economic sanctions first. Cut off their supply lines and force them to negotiate." "Negotiate?" General Voss laughed bitterly. "The Kralins understand only strength. They see our hesitation as weakness. Every day we delay, more innocent beings die under their rule." The room erupted again as different species shouted their opinions. Some wanted immediate war, others preferred diplomatic pressure, and a few were already talking about fleeing to safer sectors of the galaxy. Through it all, Marcus Reed remained silent, his hands folded calmly on the table before him. The debate continued for hours until finally, Council Chairman called for order. "We have heard from everyone except the human representative, Ambassador. Reed, what is Earth's position on this crisis?" All eyes turned to Reed as he stood up slowly. He was an ordinary-looking man in his 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes behind simple glasses. Nothing about him suggested the military might that Earth was rumored to possess. The room fell quiet as he began to speak. "The situation with the Kralin Empire is indeed serious," Reed said in a calm voice. "But I believe we are approaching this problem from the wrong angle. Instead of focusing on punishment or military action, we should be looking at the root causes of their aggression." General Voss snorted. "Root causes? Our conquerors. Plain and simple. They take what they want because they can." Reed nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, but why do they want it? What drives their expansion?" "I have studied their society extensively. I believe their aggressive behavior stems from resource scarcity and population pressure on their homeworlds." He activated a holographic display that showed detailed economic data about the Kralin Empire. "Look at these numbers. Their population has grown by 30% in the last 50 years, but their agricultural output has remained flat. Their mining operations are depleting their natural resources faster than they can find new sources. They are not expanding because they are evil. They are expanding because they are desperate." The room was silent as the representatives studied the data. Even General Voss looked thoughtful as he examined the charts showing Kralon resource depletion and population growth. "What are you suggesting?" asked Scholar Prime Eli. Reed smiled. "I am suggesting we offer them what they need instead of trying to stop them from taking it. Earth has developed advanced agricultural techniques that could triple their food production. We have mining technology that could help them extract resources more efficiently from their existing worlds. We have population management systems that could help them stabilize their growth. You want to reward their aggression?" General Voss stood up angrily. "They have murdered millions of innocent beings, and you want to give them gifts?" "To save lives," Reed replied calmly. "Both the lives of their future victims and the lives of our own people who would die in a war. Military action will cost us dearly, and even if we win, the cycle of violence will continue. The Kralins will rebuild, or another species will take their place as the galaxy's aggressor." Reed activated another display, showing a comprehensive peace plan. "Here's what I propose. We offer the Kralin Empire a full technology transfer package. In exchange for the immediate release of all enslaved populations and a binding agreement to respect the territorial integrity of all Galactic Council members, we establish trade partnerships that give them access to the resources they need through peaceful commerce instead of conquest." The plan was detailed and carefully thought out. It included economic incentives, technological assistance, and even cultural exchange programs designed to integrate the Kralins into galactic society. The other representatives studied it with growing amazement. "This is very generous," said Trade Minister Corp of the Valdros. "Perhaps too generous. What guarantee do we have that they will honor such an agreement?" "The same guarantee we have with any military solution," Reed answered. "None. But this approach offers them a path to prosperity that does not require constant warfare. It gives them a reason to keep the peace instead of just forcing them to submit to our will." General Voss shook his head. "And if they refuse? If they see this offer as a sign of weakness and become even more aggressive?" Reed's expression remained calm, but something flickered in his eyes. "Then we will have exhausted all diplomatic options, and we will respond accordingly." The debate continued for another hour, but gradually the other representatives began to see the wisdom in Reed's proposal. The Atheni praised its logical approach to problem solving. The Valdros were excited about the potential trade opportunities. Even some of the more militant species admitted that it was worth trying before resorting to war. Finally, the council voted to present the peace proposal to the Kralin Empire. The vote was not unanimous. General Voss and several other warrior species abstained, but it was a clear majority. As the session ended and the representatives began to file out of the meeting hall, General Voss approached Reed. "I hope you are right about this, human. But I fear you are being naive. The Kralins respect only strength, and they will see this offer as proof that we are weak." Reed adjusted his glasses and looked directly at the scarred warrior. "I hope for everyone's sake that they are smarter than that. Because if this diplomatic solution fails, the galaxy will learn what Earth's restraint has been protecting them from." The Hevik general studied Reed's face for a long moment, seeing something there that made him step back. Without another word, he turned and left the chamber, leaving Reed alone with his thoughts and the weight of the decision that would determine the fate of billions of beings across the galaxy. 6 months had passed since the Galactic Council approved the peace proposal for the Kralin Empire. The response had been swift and brutal. Instead of accepting the generous terms, the Kralins had launched their largest military offensive in decades. Their target was Verdant, a peaceful agricultural world inhabited by the gentle Narati people. The emergency beacon from Verdant reached Meridian Point just after dawn, local time. The distress signal was desperate and heartbreaking. The Narati had no military to speak of, only farming equipment and the simple desire to live in peace. Their plea for help echoed through the council chambers as representatives scrambled to respond to the crisis. Ambassador Marcus Reed arrived at the emergency session within hours, accompanied by Colonel Lisa Park, Earth's military liaison. Park was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, wearing the simple gray uniform of the Earth Defense Force. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen combat. But her presence at the diplomatic table was unusual. Voss was already speaking when Reed entered the chamber. "This is exactly what I predicted would happen," the Hevak warrior was saying, his voice filled with anger. The humans offered the Kralins everything they wanted, and how did they respond? By attacking the most defenseless world in the sector. The holographic display in the center of the room showed real-time footage from Verdant. Kralin warships hung in orbit like dark vultures, while smaller craft descended to the planet's surface. Smoke rose from what had been peaceful farming communities just hours before. "The Narati have no defenses," reported Scholar Prime Eli, his forearms trembling as he read from his data tablet. "Their population is approximately 50 million, mostly concentrated in agricultural settlements. They have no weapons, no military training, no way to resist the invasion." Reed took his seat and studied the tactical display that Colonel Park activated on her portable device. The Kralin fleet was large but not overwhelming, perhaps 60 ships total including troop transports. A well-coordinated military response could drive them off, but it would require immediate action. "What is Earth's response to this crisis?" demanded General Voss. "Will you finally show us this great military might we keep hearing about?" Colonel Park spoke for the first time. "We can have a battle group in the Verdant system within 72 hours, but we need to coordinate with the other council fleets. to ensure maximum effectiveness. 72 hours? Trade Minister Corp of the Valdros stood up in alarm. The Narati will be dead or enslaved by then. We need to act now. Rushing in without proper coordination will only get our people killed. Park replied calmly. The Krallans have chosen their target carefully. Verdant is in a remote sector with limited jump points. If we charge in without a plan, they can trap our fleets and destroy them one by one. The debate that followed was heated and desperate. The HFY wanted to launch an immediate assault with whatever forces were available. Athene suggested trying to negotiate with the Krallan commander directly. The Valdros were already calculating the economic impact of losing Verdant's agricultural output. Through it all, Reed remained quiet, studying the intelligence reports that Park shared with him through her secure tablet. The Krallan invasion force was larger than their initial estimates, and they had positioned themselves well. More troubling was the presence of heavy bombardment vessels, the kind used to destroy cities and terrorize populations. Ambassador Reed called out the council chairman. The galaxy is looking to Earth for leadership in this crisis. What do you propose? Reed stood slowly, his expression grave. We propose a joint task force with representatives from all willing council members. Colonel Park will coordinate the military response while I handle negotiations with the Krallan commander. We will need exactly 72 hours to position our forces properly. More negotiations? General Voss slammed his fist on the table. While you waste time talking, innocent beings are dying. And if we rush in unprepared, many more will die, Reed replied. This is not a decision we can make in anger. We need to be smart, methodical, and overwhelming when we strike. The vote was close, but the council agreed to the 72-hour timeline. As the session ended, the representatives departed to prepare their forces, leaving Reed and Park alone. In the chamber, can we really do it in 72 hours? Reed asked quietly. Park's expression was grim. We can do it in 6 hours if we deploy the 7th Fleet. But you know what that would mean? Reed nodded slowly. The 7th Fleet was Earth's most advanced battle group, equipped with weapons that had never been tested in actual combat. Using them would reveal capabilities that Earth had kept hidden from the galaxy for decades. The next 72 hours were a nightmare of coordination failures and political delays. The HFY fleet arrived first, but was forced to wait for the slower Athene research vessels. The Valdros contribution was limited to a few armed merchant ships. The joint task force that finally assembled was a mixed group of vessels with incompatible communication systems and conflicting tactical doctrines. Meanwhile, the situation on Verdant grew worse by the hour. The Krallan ground forces had surrounded the major population centers and were systematically destroying anything of value. Refugees fleeing the cities were being hunted down and captured. The peaceful Narati had no experience with warfare and could offer no resistance. Colonel Park did her best to coordinate the rescue mission, but the problems were obvious from the start. The HFY wanted to charge directly at the Krallan fleet. The Athene insisted on trying to minimize casualties on both sides. The Valdros were more concerned with protecting the agricultural infrastructure than saving lives. The attack, when it finally came, was a disaster. The mixed fleet arrived at Verdant to find the Krallan forces ready and waiting. The enemy had used the 72-hour delay to fortify their positions and call in reinforcements. What should have been a rescue mission became a prolonged battle. That accomplished nothing. Reed watched the reports from the command center on Meridian Point. His hands clenched into fists as ship after ship was lost. The joint task force fought bravely, but they were outmaneuvered and outgunned. After 6 hours of brutal combat, the surviving vessels were forced to retreat. Verdant fell that day. The Krallan Empire had gained another world, 50 million new slaves, and vast agricultural resources. The Galactic Council had suffered its first major military defeat, and the confidence of member species was shattered. In the aftermath, the blame fell squarely on Reed and his diplomatic approach. General Voss led the criticism, calling the failed rescue mission proof that Earth's restraint was actually cowardice. Where were your great weapons? Voss demanded at the emergency session held the next day. Where was this military might that everyone whispers about? You had the chance to save 50 million innocent beings, and you failed because you were too afraid to commit your real forces. Reed stood before the assembled representatives, accepting the blame and the anger. But those who looked closely could see something different in his eyes now, a cold fury that had not been there before. "You are right," Reed said quietly. "We failed the Narati people. We've let politics and caution override the need for action. That mistake will not be made again." Colonel Park stepped forward to stand beside him. "The Earth Defense Force takes full responsibility for the tactical failures of this mission. We will not make the same errors in judgment again." As the session ended and the representatives filed out, Scholar Prime Eli approached Reed with a troubled expression. "Ambassador, I must ask directly, does Earth truly possess the military capabilities that rumors suggest? Because if you do, why did you not use them to save Verdant?" Reed looked at the Athene scholar for a long moment before answering. "Scholar Prime, there are some weapons that should never be used unless there is no other choice. Today, we learn that Restraint has its own price. The question now is whether the galaxy can afford for us to keep paying it." The fall of Verdant changed everything. Within days of the failed rescue mission, 3 more systems sent out distress calls as Krylon fleets appeared in their space. The Galactic Council's defeat had emboldened the Empire beyond anyone's worst fears. What had once been calculated expansion became a feeding frenzy of conquest and destruction. The Council tried to respond, but the unity that had existed just weeks before was gone. The Valdros merchants were the first to break ranks, quietly, negotiating separate peace deals with the Krylons to protect their trade routes. The smaller species began fleeing to the far edges of the galaxy, abandoning their colonies and homeworlds rather than face the Krylon war machine. Even the warrior-like Hevik were struggling. General Voss had led his people's fleet in 2 major battles against the Krallons and lost both times. His ships were faster and his warriors braver, but the Krallon forces had superior numbers and better coordination. The general's scarred face now bore fresh wounds from the last engagement, and his voice carried the weight of too many defeats. Ambassador Marcus Reed watched the collapse of galactic civilization from his quarters on Haven Station, the Council's final stronghold. The station orbited a dead world in neutral space, far from any major trade routes or strategic resources. It had been chosen as the emergency meeting point precisely because it was so isolated that no one would bother attacking it. That assumption proved wrong when Krallon scout ships appeared on the edge of the system. The emergency session that followed was smaller than any in the Council's history. Only 12 species were represented, and half of those were present via hologram from distant hiding places. The one's grand chamber felt empty and hollow, filled more with fear than hope. "The situation is clear," General Voss was saying, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "The Krallon Empire has grown beyond our ability to contain. They have taken 47 worlds in the past month alone. At this rate, they will control half the galaxy within a year." Scholar Prime Eli consulted his data tablet with trembling hands. "Our intelligence suggests they are no longer interested in just resources and territory. They're systematically destroying entire cultures, erasing languages and histories. This is not conquest. This is genocide on a galactic scale." The holographic display showed the latest reports from the conquered worlds. Cities burned while survivors were herded into work camps. Ancient libraries and cultural sites were being demolished to make way for Krylon industrial facilities. Entire species were being forced to abandon their traditions and adopt Krylon customs. Reed listened to the reports in silence, his face showing no emotion. Beside him, Colonel Lisa Park studied tactical readouts on her secure tablet, occasionally making notes with a stylus. The 2 humans seemed oddly calm compared to the barely controlled panic of the other representatives. "What about the Outer Rim colonies?" asked one of the holographic representatives. "Can we evacuate the civilian populations before the Krylons reach them?"
"There is nowhere to evacuate them to," replied Trade Minister Corp.
"The Krallons have cut off all the major hyperspace routes. Ships trying to flee are being hunted down and destroyed." The debate continued for hours, but it was clear that no one had any real solutions. The Council was broken, their fleets scattered or destroyed, and their member species either conquered or in hiding. The great galactic civilization that had taken thousands of years to build was crumbling in a matter of months. Finally, Reed stood up and activated the central holographic display. The image that appeared showed a detailed map of Kralon space, with markers indicating fleet positions, supply lines, and command centers. "I have a final proposal," Reed said quietly. "One last chance to end this conflict without further bloodshed." Chamber fell silent as Reed outlined his plan. It was comprehensive and detailed, offering the Kralon Empire even more generous terms than his original proposal. Complete technology transfer, exclusive trade agreements, and territorial concessions. That would give them control over several resource-rich systems. In exchange, Reed continued, they must immediately cease all military operations, release all prisoners and enslaved populations, and submit to oversight by a reformed Galactic Council. They will have 7 days to accept these terms. "General," Voss laughed bitterly, "you still think they can be reasoned with? After everything they have done, you want to reward them with even more territory?" "I want to save lives," Reed replied. "This offer gives them everything they claim to want. If they refuse, then we will know that their goals are not resource acquisition or territorial expansion. We will know that they are simply destroyers who cannot be reasoned with." "And then what?" demanded the Hevik general. "What happens when they reject your generous offer and continue their rampage across the galaxy?" Reed's expression remained calm, but Colonel Park looked up from her tablet with cold eyes. "Then Earth will consider all diplomatic options exhausted." The vote to present the ultimatum was unanimous, though more from desperation than hope. The message was transmitted to the Kralon Empire's capital world within hours. Along with detailed documentation of the proposed terms, the response came faster than anyone expected. Supreme Commander Thrix, the military leader of the Kralon Empire, appeared via hologram in the council chamber the next day. He was a massive creature, even by Kralon standards, with ceremonial scars covering his arms and chest. His presence filled the room with an aura of violence and contempt. "I have come to personally reject your pathetic offer," Thrix announced without preamble. "The Kralon Empire takes what it wants by strength, not by begging for gifts from weaklings." Stood to address the Kralon commander, "Supreme Commander, the terms we have offered are generous beyond any historical precedent. You would gain more territory and resources through this agreement than you could conquer in decades of warfare." Thrix's laugh was like the growl of a predator. "You think we wage war for territory? For resources?" He gestured dismissively. "We wage war because we are strong and you are weak. Conquer because conquest is our nature." The hologram shifted to show a prison facility on one of the conquered worlds. Hundreds of Narati civilians from Verdant were chained together in work gangs, their once peaceful faces marked by starvation and despair. Children who had never known violence were being forced to carry heavy loads under the harsh supervision of Kralon guards. "These creatures serve us now," Thrix continued. "They work in our mines and factories until they die, and then we replace them with prisoners from the next world we conquer. This is the natural order. The strong rule, the weak serve." As if to emphasize his point, Thrix gave a signal to someone off-screen. The image showed a group of elderly Narati being led away from the work gangs. The implication was clear. They were being taken to their deaths because they were no longer useful. The council chamber erupted in horrified protests, but Thrix ignored them. His attention was focused entirely on Reed, studying the human ambassador with predatory interest. "I have heard rumors about your species," the Kralon commander said. "Stories of great weapons and terrible capabilities, but all I see is a tired old man making empty threats. Where is this legendary human strength? Where are these weapons that supposedly make you dangerous?" Reed's voice remained steady. "You have 7 days to reconsider our offer. After that, humanity will take whatever action we deem necessary to protect the innocent populations of this galaxy." Thrix's response was to activate another display showing Haven Station itself. Kralon warships were moving into attack positions around the station, their weapons already charging for bombardment. "Your 7 days just became 7 minutes, the Supreme Commander announced. "I will destroy this pathetic station and everyone on it as an example to the galaxy. Let them see what happens to those who oppose the Kralon Empire." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Through the station's viewports, the approaching Kralin fleet was visible as points of light growing steadily brighter. "All civilian ships prepare for immediate evacuation," announced the station commander over the intercom. "This is not a drill. All non-essential personnel report to the escape pods immediately." In the chaos that followed, Reed remained calm as he helped coordinate the evacuation. He made sure that the elderly scholar Prime Eli reached safety, assisted injured HFY warriors to the medical shuttles, and ensured that the station's data cores were properly wiped to prevent intelligence from falling into Kralin hands. Colonel Park was the last person to board the final evacuation shuttle, and Reed was right behind her. As the shuttle pulled away from Haven Station, they watched through the viewport as Kralon weapons reduced the ancient structure to debris and expanding gas clouds. "That was our last diplomatic facility," Park observed quietly. "The final symbol of galactic cooperation." Reed nodded, his hands steady as he activated his secure communication device. "I send the message," he said simply. Park's fingers moved across her tablet, entering a complex authorization code. The message that went out was brief and encrypted, but its meaning was clear to those who received it. Restraint protocols terminated. Authorization Omega-7 confirmed. All diplomatic options exhausted. Execute Protocol 7 as their shuttle jumped to hyperspace, carrying them away from the destruction of Haven Station. Reed looked out at the stars and spoke words that would echo through galactic history. The Kralin Empire wanted to see what human restraint was protecting them from. Now they will learn that some mercy, once rejected, is never offered again. The age of diplomacy was over. Age of consequences was about to begin. Admiral David Stone received the encrypted message aboard the Earth Defense Force flagship Retribution while reviewing star charts in his private quarters. The authorization code was one he had hoped never to see. Omega-7 meant that all diplomatic efforts had failed and Earth's military was free to use any means necessary to protect galactic civilization. Stone was a man in his 60s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. He had commanded Earth's secret fleets for over 20 years, always staying in the shadows while diplomats like Reed tried to solve problems with words instead of weapons. The time for words was over. He activated the ship's communication system and sent a coded signal to fleet commanders across 3 sectors of space. The message was simple: converge on Rally Point Alpha. Execute Protocol 7. All restrictions lifted. What the galaxy did not know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment since their first contact with alien species 50 years ago. While other civilizations built massive, slow-moving battleships designed to intimidate enemies, Earth had taken a different approach. Human ships were smaller, faster, and packed with technology that other species could barely imagine. The human fleet that began moving toward Kralin space consisted of over 3,000 vessels. But none of them looked like traditional warships. They resembled cargo haulers, research vessels, and civilian transports. Only their crews knew that each ship carried weapons systems that could destroy entire fleets and defensive technology that made them nearly impossible to target. Captain Roy Martinez commanded the battlecruiser Nemesis, one of the first ships to reach the Kralin border. His vessel looked like an ordinary merchant freighter from the outside, but hidden within its hull were particle beam arrays that could cut through any known armor and missile systems. Loaded with warheads that bent the laws of physics, Martinez was a quiet man who had grown up on one of Earth's colony worlds. He had joined the military after watching his home planet evacuated due to a natural disaster, and he understood better than most what it meant to lose everything. The reports from Verdant and the other conquered worlds had filled him with a cold anger that burned steadier than any fire. His first target was the Kralon shipyard at Zarian Prime, a massive industrial complex that had been producing warships for the Empire's expansion. Intelligence reports showed that 3 years' worth of military construction was docked at the facility. Waiting for final outfitting and crew assignment, the Nemesis dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zarian system, followed by 15 other ships that maintained their cargo vessel disguises. To the Kralon sensors, it looked like a small merchant convoy that had made a navigation error and ended up in restricted space. The Kralon response was predictable. A squadron of patrol ships moved to intercept the merchants, while the shipyard's defensive platforms powered up their weapons. Standard procedure was to destroy any unauthorized vessels and salvage anything useful from the wreckage. Martinez waited until the Kralon ships were committed to their attack run before dropping his vessel's disguise. The cargo bay doors opened to reveal rows of missile launchers, while hidden panels slid back to expose energy weapon arrays. In the space of 30 seconds, the Nemesis transformed from a harmless freighter into an instrument of destruction. The first salvo of missiles took out the Kralon patrol squadron before they could even react. The second wave targeted the shipyard's defensive platforms, turning them into clouds of superheated gas. The third wave hit the incomplete warships docked at the facility, each missile programmed to cause maximum structural damage with minimum collateral impact on the station's civilian areas. The battle lasted exactly 18 minutes. When it was over, 3 years of Kralon military production had been reduced to scrap metal floating in space. The shipyard itself was intact, along with its civilian workers and administrative staff, but every military asset in the system had been destroyed. Martinez recorded a message on all Kralon communication frequencies. "This is Captain Martinez of the Earth Defense Force, all Kralon. Military personnel have 96 hours to evacuate from occupied worlds. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your forces. Civilian populations will not be harmed if you withdraw peacefully." The message was broadcast throughout Kralon space as Martinez's task force jumped to their next target. Similar scenes were playing out across a dozen systems as human forces revealed themselves and began systematically dismantling the Kralon war machine. Meanwhile, Colonel Lisa Park had been given command of the ground operations to liberate prisoner camps on the conquered worlds. Her forces moved with surgical precision, using transport technology that allowed them to appear anywhere on a planet's surface without warning. Park's first mission was the liberation of the Narati survivors on Verdant. Intelligence reports showed that nearly 30 million of the gentle farmers were still alive, forced to work in mines and industrial facilities under horrific conditions. The Kralon guards were brutal and efficient, but they had never faced an enemy that could appear behind their defenses without warning. The attack began at dawn across every prison facility on Verdant simultaneously. Human soldiers materialized inside guard towers, weapon storage areas, and command centers. The Kralon forces found themselves fighting enemies who seemed to know exactly where they were and what they were planning. Within 6 hours, every prison camp on Verdant was under human control. The surviving Narati were being treated by Earth medical teams, while Kralon military personnel were being held as prisoners of war. Unlike their former captors, the humans followed strict rules about the treatment of prisoners and made sure that medical care was provided to wounded enemies. The liberation of Verdant sent shockwaves through the Kralon Empire. Supreme Commander Thrix had expected the humans to respond with traditional warfare, fleet actions and prolonged sieges that would give him time to adapt and counterattack. Instead, he found himself facing an enemy that struck everywhere at once, with weapons and tactics he had never seen before. The other galactic species watched these events with a mixture of relief and terror. General Voss, whose own fleets had been repeatedly defeated by the Kralons, studied the reports of human victories with professional interest and growing unease. The humans were not just winning, they were demonstrating military capabilities that seemed impossible. How are they doing this? Voss asked Scholar Prime Eli during an emergency meeting of the surviving council representatives. Our best intelligence suggested that Earth had perhaps 100 warships. Now they seem to have thousands of vessels appearing throughout Kralon space. Eli studied the tactical reports with his usual careful attention to detail. I believe we have fundamentally misunderstood human technology and strategy. While we focused on building larger and more powerful individual ships, they developed smaller vessels with capabilities we cannot match. Their weapons appear to be at least 50 years ahead of anything we possess. Trade Minister Corp was reviewing the economic implications of the human campaign. They are not just destroying military targets. Look at these reports. They are systematically dismantling the Kralon industrial base while leaving civilian infrastructure intact. This is not warfare as we understand it. This is surgery. The truth was becoming clear to those who studied the pattern of human attacks. Earth's military had not been hiding their strength out of fear or uncertainty. They had been restraining themselves because they possessed weapons that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Every human victory demonstrated technologies and tactics that other species would need decades to understand, much less replicate. Admiral Stone coordinated the campaign from his flagship, watching as reports flowed in from dozens of battle zones. His commanders were following their orders precisely: destroy all Kralon military assets while minimizing harm to civilian populations. It was a complex operation that required the kind of technological superiority that Earth had spent years developing in secret. But Stone knew that the most crucial moment was still to come. Supreme Commander Thrix had not yet shown any willingness to surrender. Despite losing half his fleet in the first week of fighting, intelligence reports suggested that the Kralon leader was planning something desperate, possibly involving the execution of prisoners to demonstrate that he would not be intimidated by human military success. Stone activated his secure communication channel and sent a message to all human commanders. Phase 2 authorization confirmed. If the Kralons harm any prisoners, all restraints are removed. Show them what mercy looks like when it is no longer offered. The message was clear to everyone who received it. Humanity had been holding back even during their devastating campaign against the Kralon Empire. What the galaxy had seen so far was still restrained warfare, designed to achieve military objectives while preserving life. If the Kralons crossed the line into deliberate atrocities, they would face the full weight of human military power without any limitations. The galaxy waited to see whether Supreme Commander Thrix was smart enough to recognize when he was beaten, or arrogant enough to discover what happened when humanity's patience finally ended completely. Supreme Commander Thrix made his final mistake. On a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time, faced with the systematic destruction of his military forces and the liberation of dozens of worlds, he decided to send a message that would show the galaxy he could not be intimidated by human technology. Execution was broadcast live across all Kralon communication channels. 100 Narati civilians from Verdant, including children and elderly farmers who had never harmed anyone in their lives, were lined up in front of mass graves. Thrix himself appeared in the transmission, his scarred face twisted with rage. As he delivered his ultimatum, "Let the galaxy see what happens to those who defy the Kralon Empire," he declared. "For every ship you destroy, we will execute 1,000 prisoners. For every world you liberate, we will slaughter every living being on a civilian planet. You want to save these weaklings? Then surrender your fleets and submit to Kralon rule." The executions began immediately after the transmission ended. Images that reached Earth's command centers showed acts of cruelty that went beyond military necessity into pure sadism. Thrix was not just killing prisoners. He was demonstrating that he would commit genocide rather than accept defeat. Admiral Stone watched the transmission from the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by his senior staff. The bridge crew was silent as the horrific images played out on their screens. These were professional military officers who had seen combat in a dozen different conflicts. But none of them had witnessed deliberate atrocities on this scale. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we are receiving surrender offers from Kralon commanders in 12 different systems. They are requesting immediate ceasefire and asking for terms." "Negative," Stone replied without hesitation. "Signal all commands. No terms, no negotiations, no prisoners taken from Thrix's direct command structure. As of now, the Kralon Empire is considered a threat to galactic civilization that must be completely eliminated." Admiral activated the fleet-wide communication channel and addressed every human commander simultaneously. "By order of Earth Command, and with the full authority of the human government, I am declaring the implementation of Protocol 0. The Kralon Empire has demonstrated that it cannot be reformed, contained, or reasoned with. They have chosen genocide over surrender. We will now show them what that choice means." Protocol 0 was something that had been discussed in the deepest levels of Earth's military planning, but never implemented. It meant the complete destruction of an enemy's ability to wage war, not just their defeat, but their total elimination as a military threat. No human commander had ever hoped to see those orders, but none of them hesitated to carry them out. Captain, Martinez received his new targeting orders while his task force was approaching the Kralin home system, instead of focusing on military targets, while avoiding civilian areas. His mission now included the destruction of every industrial facility, transportation hub, and communication center in Kralin space. The Empire would be reduced to individual planets with no ability to coordinate or support each other, the weapons that human ships began using. In this final phase of the campaign were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Energy beams that could destroy entire cities in seconds. Missiles that created artificial black holes to consume enemy fleets. And defensive systems that made human vessels completely untouchable. Colonel Park's ground forces received similar orders for their liberation operations. Kralin military personnel were no longer taken prisoner. Guard towers, command bunkers, and weapon storage facilities were completely destroyed. The camps were liberated, but the Empire's ability to ever build such facilities again was eliminated. Forever. The transformation of the campaign was swift and absolute. Within 48 hours of Thrix's broadcast, the Kralin Empire ceased to exist as a functioning state. Their remaining fleets were destroyed or scattered. Their industrial capacity was reduced to rubble. Their communications networks were completely severed. The other galactic species watched. These events unfold with a mixture of relief and terror. General Voss of the HFY studied the tactical reports with the eye of a professional warrior and came to a disturbing conclusion. They were never trying to win, told Scholar Prime Eli during an emergency meeting of the surviving council representatives. All this time, while we thought they were holding back out of weakness or uncertainty, they were actually restraining themselves. This is what human warfare looks like when they stop caring about collateral damage. Eli consulted his data tablets, trying to understand the scale of what they were witnessing. The technological disparity is staggering. Our most advanced weapons could not penetrate their defensive shields. Their energy output exceeds our theoretical maximums. How long have they possessed these capabilities? That is not the right question, replied Trade Minister Corp, his voice shaken by what he had seen. The right question is, if they had these weapons all along, why did they ever bother with diplomacy? Why did they sit through our council meetings and listen to our debates when they could have imposed their will on the entire galaxy? The answer to that question came in the form of a galaxy-wide broadcast from Admiral Stone himself. The transmission reached every inhabited world, every space station, every ship in the known galaxy. Stone appeared in his simple military uniform, standing on the bridge of his flagship, with the stars visible through the viewport behind him. Citizens of the galaxy, Stone began, his voice calm and authoritative. I am Admiral Stone of the Earth Defense Force. I am addressing you to explain the actions that humanity has taken against the Kralin Empire, and to clarify our intentions regarding the future of galactic civilization. The broadcast continued for nearly an hour as Stone explained the events that had led to the war and the principles that had guided human actions. He made it clear that Earth had never wanted to become the galaxy's dominant military power, but the Kralin Empire's actions had made that role unavoidable. The Kralin Empire was offered peace, prosperity, and partnership, Stone explained. They chose conquest, slavery, and genocide instead. They forced us to demonstrate capabilities that we had hoped never to use. The destruction of their military forces was not an act of aggression. It was an act of preservation for every other species in the galaxy.
Nice.
The most chilling part of the broadcast was Stone's description of what human restraint had actually prevented. The weapons used against the Kralin Empire were not humanity's most advanced military technology. They were the minimum force necessary to achieve their objectives. Earth possessed weapons that could destroy entire star systems or reshape the fundamental forces of physics. We showed restraint because we believed in a galaxy where different species could coexist peacefully, Stone continued. We were wrong. The Kralin Empire proved that some civilizations cannot be reasoned with, reformed, or contained. They can only be eliminated before they destroy everything that is good and peaceful in the universe. The broadcast ended with a warning that would echo through galactic history for centuries to come. Earth will never again make the mistake of showing mercy to those who choose genocide over peace. We will never again allow diplomatic processes to delay action against those who threaten innocent lives, and we will never again hide our capabilities while evil spreads across the stars. Supreme Commander Thrix's final transmission came 3 days later, broadcast from a damaged ship fleeing through the outer reaches of former Krylon space. The once proud military leader was reduced to a desperate fugitive, his empire destroyed, and his forces scattered. If one Thrix transmitted on all frequencies, the Krylon Empire surrenders unconditionally. I am prepared to negotiate terms for the remaining civilian populations. Admiral Stone's response was broadcast just as widely. Supreme Commander Thrix, you were offered terms once. You chose to respond with genocide. There are no negotiations. With those who murder innocents to make political points, you will be hunted down and brought to justice for your crimes against galactic civilization. The hunt for Thrix lasted another 2 weeks. He was finally cornered in a remote system by Captain Martinez's task force, his ship damaged and his crew reduced to a handful of loyal followers. The final battle lasted less than 5 minutes. Ambassador Marcus Reed returned to the reformed Galactic Council 6 months later, representing humanity at their new headquarters on Luna Base. The surviving species treated Earth with a mixture of respect and fear that was very different from the casual dismissal they had shown during the early diplomatic sessions. The council chamber was smaller now, both because many species had been destroyed or scattered by the Krylon Empire and because the new galactic order required fewer debates and more direct action. Earth's military capabilities were no longer hidden, and other species understood that human recommendations carried the weight of absolute force behind them. The galaxy is at peace now, Reed addressed the assembled representatives during his first speech to the Reformed Council. But it is not the peace we originally sought through diplomacy and cooperation. It is the peace that comes from the understanding that some evils cannot be tolerated and some mercy cannot be offered twice. General Voss, representing the surviving HFY worlds, asked the question that everyone was thinking. What happens now? Will Earth become the galaxy's ruler through military dominance? Reed's answer was simple and terrifying in its implications. Earth has no desire to rule the galaxy. We want only to ensure that what happened with the Krylon Empire never happens again. We will continue to prefer diplomatic solutions to problems, but the galaxy now understands what will happen to any species that chooses genocide over negotiation. The meeting ended with the establishment of new protocols for galactic civilization. Territorial disputes would be resolved through arbitration. Resource conflicts would be handled through managed distribution systems. And any species that threatened civilian populations would face the immediate and overwhelming response of Earth's military forces. Peace reigned throughout the galaxy. But it was a peace built on the understanding that humanity's restraint was a gift that would never be offered to those who rejected it. The Krylon Empire had learned too late that some mistakes could not be survived, and the rest of the galaxy made sure to remember that lesson.